What's going on, Leafs Nation? Victor here. And I've got to say, this feels like one of those moments where everything around this team suddenly collides. On one hand, you've got the Leafs ripping off 3 straight wins, clawing back into the playoff conversation, sitting just 6 points out of a wild card spot heading into the Olympic break. The vibe feels different. There's life again. There's belief creeping back in. But at the exact same time, you've got serious talk starting to bubble up about major roster decisions, including the idea of moving on from a core defenseman and reshaping the blue line entirely. That's not noise. That's tension. Quick favor before we keep going. If you're a Leafs fan who's riding this roller coaster with us, hit that like button and subscribe. We're pushing towards 600 subscribers, and every bit of support really helps this channel grow. Because the Leafs are stuck between 2 paths right now. Do you chase this run and push forward, or do you sell, retool, and make uncomfortable choices while you still can? That crossroads is real, and once you see how these 2 stories connect, it says a lot about where this team might be headed next. All right, let's talk about something that honestly feels heavy as a Leafs fan. When I first heard this idea floating around, my reaction wasn't excitement. It was pause. Because anytime you hear Morgan Rielly connected to a trade, you know we're not talking about a small tweak anymore. We're talking about a real shift in direction. According to NHL analyst Nick Capreos, the Leafs could seriously consider moving Rielly and then filling that hole in a very aggressive way in the offseason. The suggestion is that Toronto would trade Morgan out and go after Darren Raddysh from Tampa Bay as a replacement. And Capreos didn't exactly whisper it. He basically said this is the kind of move he expects to happen. Now, as a fan, this is complicated. Rielly has been a Leaf his entire career. 13 seasons in this market, no drama, no nonsense. He's been as reliable as they come. Every single year, more than 20 assists. This season alone, he's sitting at 7 goals and 24 assists in 54 games. That's steady production, especially from a guy who's been asked to do a lot in all situations. He's 31 now, and that's where the conversation changes. If the Leafs decide to sell or retool, Morgan Rielly suddenly becomes a very attractive piece to other teams. He's experienced, he can move the puck, and he can help a contender right away. From a purely business standpoint, it makes sense why his name is coming up, even if emotionally it's hard to swallow. What really grabs your attention, though, is the replacement being talked about. Darren Raddysh is having a breakout season. 51 points in 48 games as a defenseman. That's point-per-game production from the blue line, something this team honestly hasn't had in years. 17 goals, 34 assists, and he's doing it with confidence, with a shot that actually scares teams from the point. And I get why that's tempting. As a Leafs fan, we've watched this team struggle to generate offense from the back end when it matters most. We've watched teams sag off our defense and dare us to beat them from the blue line. The idea of adding a defenseman who can truly drive offense changes the look of this team immediately. But here's the part that makes me uneasy. You're not just swapping players. You're letting go of stability, leadership, and familiarity for upside and risk. Raddysh has never played in this market. He's never been the guy on a blue line under this kind of pressure. And Morgan Rielly, for all the criticism he gets, has worn all of that for years without blinking. So this move would say something very clearly. The Leafs believe the current version of this core needs a new look, even if that means moving on from someone who feels like part of the identity. And that's why this matters to the fan base, because it tells us management might be preparing for change, not just reacting to results. It tells us they're already thinking beyond this season and asking uncomfortable questions about who stays, who goes, and what this team actually needs to be. And here's where things get really interesting. Because while this kind of move sounds like something you only do if the season is slipping away, the Leafs situation right now isn't that simple. Coming out of the Olympic break, the standings, the momentum, and the way this team has played lately suddenly make that decision a lot harder than it looked just a week ago. Now let's talk about what just happened, because this team refuses to make things simple. A week ago, it felt like the season was slipping right through our fingers. The Leafs had just lost 5 straight at home, then went out west and dropped another one to Seattle. At that point, they were 10 points out of a playoff spot, free-falling in the standings, and it really felt like the end of the line. You could feel it, that familiar sense of, here we go again. That's when the talk about selling at the deadline really started to make sense, and not in a dramatic way, in a logical way. The season looked done. The playoff streak looked like it was about to end. It felt like the front office was going to have to accept reality. And then, the Leafs did what they always do. They won in Vancouver, they won in Calgary, and then they went into Edmonton and beat the Oilers. Just like that, 3 straight wins, and now they're sitting 6 points out of the final wildcard spot heading into the Olympic break. The entire conversation changed, again. And what stood out to me most wasn't just the wins, it was how they won. After going forever without power play chances, they finally got a 5-on-3, and they capitalized. That felt huge, not just on the scoreboard but emotionally. It was a sign of life, a reminder that when this team executes, when it plays connected, it can still beat anyone. Craig Berube even said it himself. Those 3 wins going into the break gave the team a real boost. You could see it in the way they competed. There was urgency, there was structure, there was belief. So now we're in that uncomfortable middle ground again. On one side, you've got real reasons to be cautious. The Leafs have been burned at the deadline before. Overpays, short-term thinking, deals that looked fine at the time but hurt later. And even now, the front office hasn't backed off its stance. According to Chris Johnston, Brad Treliving is still evaluating the market, still checking values, still preparing to sell, even with the recent wins. That tells you something. At the same time, as a fan, it's hard not to feel pulled in the other direction. Austin Matthews looks like himself again. William Nylander is flying. Jake McCabe stepped up in massive matchups. And when this team plays the right way, it still feels dangerous, especially in a league where there's no clear runaway favorite. That's the emotional conflict right now. Do you protect the future and sell while you still can? Or do you believe in this group just a little longer and see if they can close that gap? And this is where everything comes together. Because when you put this sudden push back into the playoff race next to the idea of potentially moving a core piece like Morgan Rielly, it tells you exactly where the Leafs are. They're at a crossroads, not panicking, not committing, but standing right in the middle, with one foot pointed toward the future and the other still trying to chase the present. And what happens next, coming out of this Olympic break, is probably going to decide which way they finally step. So when you step back and look at all of this, it really tells you one thing. The Leafs are at a defining moment. Those 3 straight wins didn't save the season, but they changed the conversation. They reminded everyone, including the front office, that this team still has fight, still has talent, and still isn't ready to quietly fade away. At the same time, the standings don't lie. The margin is thin, the catch-up is real, and there's no room for another long skid. As a fan, this feels like a moment of cautious hope mixed with real pressure. Hope because this team showed it can respond when it's pushed. Pressure because now they have to prove it wasn't just a short burst before the break. Coming out of the Olympics, every game is going to matter, and the choices the Leafs make off the ice are going to matter just as much as what happens on it. This is where belief meets accountability, and how this team responds is going to define the rest of the season. Now I want to hear from you. Do you still believe the Leafs can make a real push here, or do you think it's time to protect the future and make some tough calls? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button if you appreciate real Leafs talk, and subscribe to the channel. We're pushing towards 600 subscribers, and every single one of you really helps this community grow. This is Victor. Thanks for being here. And as always, go Leafs go!